In this video, we're going to look into how we go about assigning controls to our skeleton. So in the last video, where I left off, I was kind of testing my skinning and basically assign a couple keyframes to a couple of these joints and just try the animation. And now this is at a point where I've already kind of worked on skinning my character. And it's working pretty well. And now we want to start the process of now that everything's kind of skinned the way it's supposed to be, we want to be able to reach some of these bones and control this joints to be able to control the character rather than having to select our joints directly, because that way is not very effective. One thing that I want to point out in this video again with this jawbone, the way that this was made, this the bottom teeth and the tongue are actually assigned to this bone, and they were both bind skin by using the select joints technique. It's the same technique that we use with the eyes, so just basically assigning to that bone, and they're just going to pretty much be able to kind of follow along with that. Alright, so that's probably the only thing that I didn't show in the last video. Other than that, the binding the painting weight tools process is pretty much the same for everything else. So one of the things that I'm going to start with, as far as assigning controls, it's a global control, and it's basically a control that's going to pretty much control the whole system here. So these controls can be pretty much anything, as long as is usually something like a spline object or something like some sort of helper. Something that's not going to be renderable in the viewport and things like that. As long as it has the right kind of constraint and it's 0 out, so you can go back to the original position. It doesn't really matter what it is or how it's created. So I'm gonna the process that I'm going to show you is basically using nerve circles. All right. Again, the reason why I'm using circles is just because it's just kind of easy to do. I'm not trying to do anything super fancy with this rig. If you want to create customized controls using splines, again, the only thing you have to make sure of is they're one object. Again, I'm using circles because they're one object. I would not recommend for you to use something like a square, because it's usually 4 different splines together, so this is not going to be very efficient as far as a control. So as long as you make it into one piece, you can pretty much use anything you want. So I'm going to go ahead and this is going to be my global control. Alright, and again, you need to kind of get into the habit of start labeling this thing. I'm hoping you kind of went in there and took the time to actually name your bones, so you know where everything else. So I'm going to start by labeling these controls. TRL underscore, and again, this let's just call it global. Just label it any way that it kind of makes sense to you. Again, this is going to be, for me, it's going to be a global control that just kind of pretty much controls the every single control, every single joint in this skeleton is going to follow it. So that's basically why it's a global. And I just kind of snapped it there to my spine bone, since it's kind of like in the middle of my character there, and then I kind of moved it down. All right, and then this I want to go ahead and go into modify and freeze the transformations. Again, the idea is that if I go in here and I move this anywhere, I should be able to just zero it out and go back to my default position. Alright, and we're going to be doing the same with pretty much every single control that we create for this character. It's going to be it's something that's freezing your transformation is something that's very essential to this process. So now that we have a global control, I'm going to go into my outliner here. One of the things that we need to start doing is basically making sure there are joints in our IK chains, which are the ones that are assigned to the arms and the legs for the inverse kinetics. They are assigned, or they're grouped or kind of parented to this global control. So again, the idea is that whatever I move it, however I scale this control, the bone, the joints, and the IK handles are basically just going to be able to kind of follow along. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to select these guys, and I'm just going to go ahead and group them by do Control G. Alright, and I'm just going to call these IKs, and I'm going to assign them. I'm going to middle mouse click and just drag them into my global control. And now notice in my outliner, basically I have this says joint 17, which is basically this right here. Okay, this is the root of all my skeleton. Basically, the way that this was created, everything's kind of being connected in a hierarchy, and this is the root of everything. So and again, I just for the sake of kind of efficiency, I just kind of went ahead and just kind of kept working without labeling. But I suggest you take the time to actually go back and label your bones, just so you know what's what. So this chain of joints, you're gonna have making part of this global control. So I'm gonna take him in here and actually parent it to that. I just added it to this group right here. Alright, so the idea again is that if I select my global control, my character is going to pretty much move with it. Alright, and again I can zero this out, and another thing I'll be able to do is basically be able to scale up or scale down my character if I need to, depending on the scene that it's going. And again, it's kind of everything's kind of scaled uniformly. You do not want to take the body, the mesh, and assign it or drag it into this global control, because if you do, you'll have something called double scaling, which means that if I take this body and I drag it into this control and I go into my global control and I scale, it's going to scale again twice. So basically the body is not going to stick to what the joints are doing. So you need to keep the body out of that group. Alright, so that's our global control. Now let's start working on the controls that we're gonna need for the chest. Okay, so let's we're gonna need a control for our chest, which is this bone right here, and it's gonna be controlling this rotation. We're gonna need one for the back, which is this joint, and it's controlling this rotation. We're gonna need one for our pelvis, which is this right here, and it's controlling this. And then we're gonna have one that pretty much controls our root as well. Okay. So again, I'm gonna be using spline objects for this. You're welcome to use anything that something more fancier that you create yourself, or sometimes you can actually find these objects online. But again, I'm just going to be using simple spline objects or even helpers to get this accomplished. So I'm going to go here into my nerves. I'm going to do another circle. Alright. I probably just want to keep one here as the original, then just kind of do kind of copies of it and as I need them. So I'm going to do a duplicate of this one. I'm going to start with the control for the chest. Okay, so I'm going to select it, while holding V. Again, it's going to turn on my snapping, so I'm going to just see if I can snap it right there to that bone, and it snapped pretty well. Alright, and again, the idea is that I can actually select this control so I can control this. So basically, what we're going to do is a constraint that it's going to make this joint follow with the orientation of whatever control is being assigned to. So that's why it's important that the pivot of it kind of matches what the original bone is doing, or at least it's kind of centered to it, because if the pivot of your object is somewhere else, it's going to be rotating based on that and not in the center of it. So we have this, and I'm going to label this CTRL underscore chest, and again, you can label this any way kind of makes sense to you. The next thing I need to do is make sure, again, a couple things have kind of happened here, and I like to be able to go back to the original position of my bone if I do a movement that I'm not sure of or whatever. So I want to make sure I go into the modified and freeze the transformation so everything's back to zeros and scale of 1. So then to constrain the movement of this bone to the orientation of this, I'm going to select the control, then the bone that I want to constrain to, which is this one, and then I'm going to go to constraints, and I'm going to be using let's see, the Orient Constraint for this. Okay, and again, this is basically going to constrain the rotations or the movement of this joint to the rotation of this control. Alright, and then by default we want to constrain all axes, X, Y, and Z, but you need to make sure you maintain the offset, because if you don't, let's say I select my control, I select my joint here, and I apply this, it's gonna kind of change. It's gonna snap the rotation of the bone. So we wanted to keep the offset of what it originally has. So again, select this, select the bone, maintain offset, and apply. All right, and again, it didn't snap. And now that joint is gonna follow on the orientation of that control. All right. So so that's the first one, and another thing that you can do to just kind of keep things organized for yourself, seeing that this control is only going to affect the orientation of this, and you don't want it to affect, let's say, the translate and scale of it. You could try and you would just go in here into the channel box and just kind of get rid of what you don't need. So I'm by highlighting the translate, I'm just right clicking and I'm just hiding those selections. Alright, and again, it's up to you if you want to leave the visibility on. I'll just kind of leave it there for myself, and then I'm just going to hide. Alright, so that means if I need to go in here and rotate any of these locally, I'm not going to move them or scale them by accident. Alright, so that's the first control. Let's go ahead and create the back one. Control D. And again, I'm going to hold V so I can snap this control to that backbone or middle spine right there. Alright, and if I need to scale it or make it any different, I can do that at this point. Alright, so again, it doesn't have to be the same thing. I want to make sure that I go into the modify and freeze the transformation so that all of this is back to 0s and 1. And we're going to do another Orient Constraint here. So select the control, select the joint, and then apply. Okay, so now this controls that. Okay, but one of the things that we're seeing here is that again, if I'm kind of bending my back, I want my chest bone to kind of follow along with it. So another thing that I need to do besides the parent constraints, I need to go in here and make sure that some of these are kind of parented to make sure that they follow along. So the chest bone, I want to go ahead and parent it to this, so when I move it, it follows along. So select the first one, the parent, select the child, click on P for parenting. Alright, and now if I move this bone, ooh, did I do it wrong? Yep, okay. Let's just undo that. Okay. So select the one, again select the child, select the parent, then click on P for parenting, and now this one should follow along. Alright. There we go. That's better. Alright, and again I want to make sure that I want to keep saving my progress just in case that for some reason I need to get back to a point where everything's working perfectly. So I suggest, as you do changes like these, just make sure you save as before and then continue a different version of the file. So okay, we have the back, and again I need to go back here, ctrl _ back. Alright, and I need a control for my pelvis, and I need a control for the root of my skeleton. Okay, so I'm gonna need 2 more of these. So let's just do Control D here, and I'm gonna snap it right here to the root. So holding V right there, and I think that scale is fine. Alright, then I'm gonna make another duplicate of this one, Control D, and this one's gonna be a little larger. Okay, and again this one's gonna be controlling the root of our skeleton, which is this bone right here, and this one's going to be controlling our pelvis. So let's just go ahead and select these two. We want to freeze transform them. Okay, so they're all kind of back at zeros, and then again we want to label these. So in my case, ctrl _ pelvis. This one is ctrl _ you can call that root or center or gravity, whatever whatever makes sense to you. So let's just go ahead and do, again we're going to be doing orientation constraint for this. So for the pelvis, we're going to do an orientation. For the root, we're actually going to be doing a parent constraint. So I select the control for the pelvis. I select the pelvis itself, and then I do apply. Okay, and now this control is going to control the movement of our pelvis. Okay, and then I select the control the root itself, and again rather than using the orientation for this one, I'm going to go ahead and actually use the parent constraint. And again we want to do both translate and rotate for this one, and we want to maintain the offset so our joints don't snap. So I'm just going to go ahead and apply. Okay, and again, notice that I did not freeze transform this correctly, so I want to make sure. What did I? Okay, so I believe that what this is doing is actually taking into sharing what the root of our skeleton. Again, we don't have this kind of zeroed out, so let me just kind of do it one more time. Let's just apply it. Okay, again that's at 0, so again my bad about that. Alright, and again the parent constraint is going to allow for us to not only affect the orientation of it by doing rotation like this, but it's also going to be able to affect the position of it. So that's the difference between the two. Now, again, you just saw that I did a test with this control. Basically, I need these controls to kind of follow along as I'm doing some of these tests. Just like we did with the backbone, as in we parented the chest to this one so it'll follow along. We want to make sure that again, this control is going to have to be parented to the root, and so is the pelvis. So when I move the root control, it actually follows along. So let's see. Let's see, the child, the parent, and then P. Okay. So again, if I move, that's going to follow along. So same with this one, child and parent. Okay. So now all of these controls are going to follow along the root control. All right, and I'm going to be able to use them individually as well, but at the same time they'll follow along if I don't need this one parented to that one. But even if I do, that's something that I can do later on. Alright, so this takes care of our torso here. Alright. Another thing that I can start doing at this point, again, notice that when I parent these, all are pretty much under my control root kind of group right here. Alright, and again, these are controls that I actually need to make sure that are under my global control for them to kind of follow along. If I select this and I move it, these controls are not going to follow along. If I scale my character, they're not going to scale with it. Okay, so that's going to affect my rig. So what I need to do, again, I'm going to select the root, which is this one that has all of these kind of parented to it, and I'm just going to go ahead and drag it into my global control. Alright, so now if I come here and scale this down or move it around, these controls are going to follow along. So we got to make sure that these controls are kind of following along with the hierarchy that we're kind of building right here with this global control. So let's move on to the next part. Let's see, we did global control, we did the torso. Now let's do the head. Alright, so we're gonna do a couple more controls. Alright, so it's gonna be one for the head, one for the neck. We're gonna create a control for our eyes as well, so the bones here kind of follow along with this, and we can also create a control for our jaw, so we don't have to actually go in here and select this joint to be able to control that animation. So I'm just gonna go ahead and duplicate this. Alright, hold V. So again, I wanna create one for the neck. So that can be it right here. Okay. Again, I can scale this down, make sure it fits. Alright, and again, it needs to kind of be big enough for me to be able to select it too. So something like that can work well. Then I need to do one for the head. So do a Control D, and then hold V, and I'm just going to snap it to the head right there. Okay. Now, if this one, again, what you gotta realize with these controls is that it's not necessarily, they don't have to be positioned, the way that I'm kind of showing you how I'm positioning them. Okay. And again, I'm trying to snap this to the bone here, but it's kind of giving me a hard time. The idea is that the control that you are applying to this can be pretty much anywhere, as long as the pivot of the control is where it needs to be. So if I feel that this neck control is not it's not really accessible there, I can always kind of select this control, move it up a little bit, scale it down so it's not kind of collapsing with the mesh, and it just looks like a neck control. All right, but the pivot of the control needs to stick to here, because again, we're going to be doing an orientation constraint, and it basically it's going to be moving based on the rotation of this one, and it can't be moving based on this pivot. So we need to make sure we snap our pivot to this bone right here. So the shortcut to manipulate your pivot, it's D. All right, so just hold D and you can kind of go in here and manipulate your pivot, and you can also hold V at the same time, and you'll be able to snap it to where you need it to go. So now if I select this control, again, notice that its pivot is actually at where at the root of this joint right here. So if it's easy to access here, and it's going to be rotating based on this pivot rather than what it had originally. All right. So again, we have a control for the neck. We have a control for the head. We also need a control for the eyes. All right, and one for the jaw. All right. So again, you got to keep in mind that what I'm showing you is only one way of doing things. Based on what I just told you, that it just kind of based. It can pretty much be anywhere as long as the pivot is in the right location for the orientation. You can pretty much position these controls wherever you want. If you don't want the head control right here, it's completely up to you if you want to keep it in that position. I think for and again, this is just kind of a thought that I had just to kind of make things clear for me. I could probably put it up here, maybe move the pivot here, so it's not kind of in the same position as my jaw control is going to be. That way I can control the rotation and the movement of my head. Again, and I need to make sure that I manipulate the pivot so it's actually centered here. So again, D, then V, and then I can just kind of snap it to the center there. Alright, so anything that I do to this control, if I'm going to manipulate the head, is going to be based on that pivot, including the movement. Alright, so again, you can take a little bit of liberties with your rig, as long as it kind of functions correctly. Now that we have neck, we have the head, we need to do a control for the eyes, and we need to do a control for the jaw. So I'm going to have my body just to kind of help me kind of get these correct, and I want to make a duplicate of this one. Alright, and again, I probably want to go ahead and center the pivot in this one. Alright, so back where it used to be. I'm going to hold V just so I can snap it right here to the center. And I'm going to rotate this one 90 degrees here. Okay, again, I'm going to turn on my mesh here. Now again, I'm going to scale this up. So I'm just going to make sure basically that I have access to this control. Alright, and that I'm able to select it, and the pivot is at the center of this, and it's going to be, if I do the rotation, it's going to be able to manipulate the jaw there. So that's going to be the jaw control. Okay. I'm going to be using a aim constraint for this. Another thing that you can try and maybe do something like an aim constraint. If you have some sort of control out here that it's going to be able to follow along with this and stuff like that. So again, I'm going to be using a Orient Constraint to be able to manipulate this bone, but there are different ways that you can kind of go about this. What I'm showing you is just one way. So definitely feel free to kind of experiment just to kind of see what kind of works better for you. So again, I'm gonna hide my body here, and I need to create a control that my eyes are kind of pretty much gonna follow along with here. So all right, now we're gonna be using for the eyes. We're gonna be using a M vector. An aim constraint. So they're basically going to be following along what this is doing. So I'm going to need to maybe do a point constraint first. Maybe that's going to allow me to kind of figure out what the center of the eyes are, so they don't kind of snap off position. But I'm going to get to that in a second. Let's go ahead, and I'm just going to freeze transform the other controls that I created first, and I'm going to tend to those first, and then I'll deal with the eyes. So let's just freeze transformation. Okay, I'm going to label these CTRL head. This is CTRL jaw, and this one's going to be CTRL neck. Alright. So let's start with the head. We're going to do an Orient constraint based to this control. So I'm going to select the control. I'm going to select the head bone, which is this guy right here. And then I'm going to do an Orient. And again, I just want to look at my settings, make sure that the offset is maintained. So I click apply. And again, if I go in here, again, notice that it's rotating based on the pivot and not on the location of the control. Alright. So that's one. Now let's do a, we need to do a Orient constraint for the neck as well. So select this control. Alright, select that joint, do that, and now the neck's going to be following this control. Alright, and again, just want to make sure that all these are freeze transformed before you do anything to them. And then we're going to do an Orient constraint for the jaw control here. Alright, so it's in process, select control, select my jaw bone, and apply. Okay, so if I go here into my body, again, now this control is going to be manipulating my jaw. Alright, this one is going to be manipulating my neck. Alright, okay. And again, one of the things that is happening here is that, you know, my head is not really following along with my neck. Ooh. So we need to make sure we do a little bit of parenting to make sure that these are following along, because again, my jaw is not following along with what this one's doing. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to select the child, then the parent. Alright, so the idea is that that jaw bone is going to follow along with the head when it turns. Alright, and then we want the head to follow along with the neck when the neck turns. See that? Okay. So that's working pretty well. And okay, so now we need to figure out the eyes. Let's see. Alright, and this is going to be the last thing we'll do for this video. I think I'm going to do second one. We'll address the rest of the body. But let's just focus on the eyes right now. And then let that be where this lesson concludes. So I'm going to go ahead and hide my body, hide my eyes. Alright. One of the things that you got to do sometimes is to you gotta especially if you're using we're going to be using a name constraint for this. So one of the things that we need to kind of make sure is that especially if we're gonna have both of these bones kind of aiming at one thing, is that this is kind of centered perfectly kind of between the two. And the way you do that, and again, I'm gonna go ahead and do save right now. Do a save as. Alright, again, just in case I messed up and then I need to go back to a file that's kind of working correctly. We're gonna apply a point constraint, and what the point's gonna do is pretty much kind of snap it at kind of the center between 2 points. So the way we're gonna do that, we select the 2 points that we wanted to kind of snap with. And again, one of the things that I didn't do, at least with this bone, is to make sure to go in here and deleted my keyframe. So I'm just going to go and do that right now. So again, I'm going to select that, my tile frame, and delete. That's probably a keyframe that I left from my testing stage. So I want to select both joints that I want this to kind of be centered at. Then I'm going to select the control, and then I'm going to click on point. Alright, so it's actually snapped right there in the middle, and you can see that there is a constraint applied to our control. Now, we're only using this point constraint to snap the control to the center of those points. So we actually need to get rid of that. And if you select the control, and if you look here on your outliner, you can actually find that constraint here, and you can actually just kind of get rid of it there. Alright, so now it's no longer applied to it. So one of the things that I'm going to do now then is just kind of scale this down a bit. And again, these controls can have any shape you want. Again, I'm just trying to keep it simple here for the sake of efficiency. I'm just going to go back to turning these on. So I'm going to take this, move it forward. Okay. I think that's at a good distance. So now that this is where it kind of needs to be, then I'm going to freeze transform it again, so everything's at 0, 0, 0. And then again, I can just kind of go ahead and hide these again. I'm going to select each one individually, and I'm going to do an aim constraint. Okay. So I'm going to click on the options for it so we can kind of take a look at it. Now, one of the things that you need to be mindful with the aim constraint is that the aim vector and the up vector have to match with basically how the bones are kind of laid. So I think this is correct. Okay, so it's basically again, we can see here in our vector that our x is actually pointing in the positive direction, so the aim vector is at a positive 1, and our y, it's at a positive 1, which is facing up. So this is actually correct. And again, let's just see if this works. Alright, so I'm going to select the bone, I'm going to select the control, sorry, then the joint, and then apply. Okay, so what just happened now is that now this joint is actually going to be moving along with my control here. So I want to do the same with the other one, and then apply it. Okay, then I'm just going to close this one. I'm going to open up my body and my eyes first, and again, just so you kind of see what's going on here. And let's get rid of our joints again. Alright, so the idea is that we have this control now, and it's actually controlling the movement of our eyes. Alright, so that's looking pretty nice. Alright, and again, I can snap everything back to zeros. Okay. Let's see. This control, which is the eye control, CTRL, eyes, again, we need to make sure that these are also parented to our either our global or our root control, because again, if I move this, those controls are not moving with it. All right. So one of the things that I'm going to do is that I'm going to parent the eyes to the head. All right. So again, if I move the neck, they're going to follow along. All right. And then I'm going to parent. Let's parent the neck to the chest. So parent, and then child. Parent is going to be the chest. Okay. So now the eyes and the head and the neck are going to kind of follow along. And again, notice that by grouping these, that are part now of our global control. So if I go in here and scale this up and down or whatever, it's going to follow along. Okay. And alright, so this concludes the setup for the global control, and basically we also set up our chest, and we set up our head, and we added a jaw control and eyes. Alright, so on the next video we're going to address how we go about setting controls for our arms. We're going to create a swivel control for our elbows and our knees. Alright, so this concludes